There's no question whatsoever that 1,500 years ago in the land of Israel, the Jews pronounced that sound as a V.
So much has come in question about the pronunciation of the name. More than 6,828 times in the Bible, YHVH appears. And Nehemiah Gordon, we have a number of questions that have come up on this, and so let's handle some of the basics on that.
So one of the questions, I get this about once a week, and what they're asking me is they say, okay, in the vowels that you have in the Hebrew Bible, the name is Yehovah, but that Hebrew letter Vav isn't the V, it's a W. And I get this question about once a week from people. And actually, can I read one?
Yes.
This is very typical of the type of questions I'll get on this. And usually what they'll say is they'll say, I thought you knew Hebrew. How can you be so stupid? Don't you know there's no V sound in the Hebrew language? And the ones who are maybe a little bit more respectful, here's what they'll say. This guy says, he says,
they start out with all due respect, and then they insult you.
Right. Oh, they don't even bother with that. He says, I'm slightly puzzled with the pronunciation of wow. I am admittedly no Hebrew scholar, I'll bet. But for years I've been under the impression that the wow is pronounced with a hard V because of influences from German translators, and that the w is pronounced as a German w, which is a V. And so here's what they're thinking, that or the argument is that somehow the pronunciation of the sound V comes from German. And where do they get that idea? It's not as far-fetched as it sounds at first, because many Jews coming from Europe spoke a language called Yiddish. Like my grandmother, who was born in Eastern Europe, she spoke Yiddish as her mother tongue. And Yiddish which actually means Jewish. Yid is a Jew in German. Yiddish is a dialect of German. I'm told it's actually closer to Dutch than it is to German. But it's mixed in 85% German, about 10% Hebrew, and 5% from other languages, Slavic and things like that. So there were Jews who spoke a Germanic language, Yiddish, and you could argue that they were influenced by the German language to lose the V sound in the Hebrew. But let's even back up before that. How do we know how to pronounce anything in Hebrew? How do I know the Hebrew letter mem is really m? Maybe the Hebrew letter mem is really k or duh. How do I know? So what happened is scholars went around the Jewish world in the 1800s, and this is at a time when there were Jews living all over the world without communication with each other, and they documented how they pronounced every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Hey, all of those were identical. It didn't matter if you were a Jew from Lithuania or a Jew from Yemen or a Jew from the mountains of Kurdistan. They all pronounced Hebrew the same. When they got to the sixth letter of the alphabet, they found two different pronunciation traditions. Some Jews pronounced the letter as V, as a V in English, but it was a Hebrew letter. And some pronounced it as a W, like a W in English. And I say like a W, it was not a W. I'll get people here, a guy writes to me and he says, but the W only came later. Originally, there was just a V. That has nothing to do with Hebrew. The Hebrew language has authentically those two sounds. In the 1800s, some Jews V, some W. In fact, most Jews pronounced it V, not just the German-speaking, Yiddish-speaking Jews, but for example, the Jews of Syria, who had been there since the time of King David, when they read from the Torah, they pronounce the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet as V. Now, that's very interesting because when they speak at home to each other, they don't speak Hebrew. When they were at home in Damascus and Aleppo, before they were driven out of there, they would speak Arabic. Arabic doesn't have a V sound, and it has that letter. The letter Vav exists in Arabic, and it's pronounced wow. And in fact, the pronunciation of wow comes from Arabic. I was sitting recently with the member of the Academy of the Hebrew Languages. This is one of the top people in the world when it comes to the Hebrew language. And I asked him, I said, now there are 5 Jewish communities that preserve this W pronunciation. One of them is the Yemenite Jews.
Just
5 small Jewish communities. Of all the Jews in the world, only 5 preserved the W sound.
Okay, and that's probably instructive in itself.
It's interesting.
Where they are.
So there are Yemenite Jews, Libyan Jews, and a few other places like that. And they're all Arabic speaking. And I said to this professor, I said, is it possible that this was influenced by Arabic? He said, it's not possible. It's 100% certain. This is one of the top experts in the world. He's not, no agenda, no axe to grind. He's actually an Arabic speaker himself.
And he's not pronouncing the name anyway.
He's not pronouncing the name anyway. He's talking about the Hebrew language. He doesn't even know I'm interested in the name. I'm talking to him about the pronunciation of the Hebrew language. And then he showed me some ancient sources, which I'll get to in a minute if we have some time. It's quite fascinating. But basically what he's saying is, you can explain why a Yemenite Jew would say "wa" because he's speaking Arabic, and in Arabic, they have the same letter and it's W. But why would a Jew from Damascus who speaks Arabic as his daily language, why when he all of a sudden reads Hebrew in the synagogue would his daily W become V? He's clearly preserving something authentic to the Hebrew language. Now, that's only 150 years ago, 200 years ago. I wanted to go back further. So I scoured the sources with his help, and one of the things I found is that in ancient Hebrew, we have a poet named Kalir in the 6th century in the land of Israel. So now we're going back 1500 years, and this poet is writing, he's rhyming, and his rhymes, he rhymes two words, the word Levi, Levite, which is with a Vav, and the other word is Navi, prophet. Now, here's the really funny thing. I'll get these emails where they'll say, well, how do you not know? I thought you know Hebrew, Nehemiah. How is it you don't know there's no V sound in the original Hebrew language? So the one thing all Jewish communities agree, whether you're from Yemen or Damascus or the mountains of Kurdistan, all Jews agreed that the V sound does exist in the Hebrew language in the letter bet. The letter bet with a dot is B, without a dot is V. The example is Yaakov, Jacob. In English, it's Jacob, but in Hebrew, it's Yaakov, what we call a soft bet. A soft bet is a V sound. And all Jews agree that that V sound exists in the Hebrew language. The only dispute is about the W versus the V in the Vav, the 6th letter of the alphabet. So this poet from the 6th century, from the 500s, he rhymes Navi with a soft bet, which everyone agrees on, with Levi. Now, according to the Yemenites, they don't pronounce it Levi, they pronounce it Lewi. And Lewi doesn't rhyme with Navi. He has a whole series of words which are actually V, and one of those is Levi. And there's no question whatsoever that 1,500 years ago in the land of Israel, the Jews pronounced that sound as a V. The interesting thing is 700 years later, this rabbi comes along named Ibn Ezra, and he was a famous poet. And he's criticizing this earlier poet from 700 years before, and he said, how could he be so stupid to rhyme Navi with Levi? Because in Ibn Ezra's Hebrew, Ibn Ezra spoke Arabic. And in his Hebrew, it was Lewi. He doesn't understand how this guy 700 years before in Israel is rhyming Navi with Lewi. There you see the influence of Arabic. And you can go back all the way to the time of Ezekiel and show, for example, the word for back in Hebrew is gav, and that gav can be written with a soft bet or with a vav. And the only way that can happen is if the soft bet and the vav have the same pronunciation.
Now, I need to point out that the reason why you're seeing all this is that Nehemiah is not reading English works. The Hebrew works have been translated into English. He is reading these ancient things in handwritten Hebrew.
Oh, yeah, these are Hebrew manuscripts.
Yeah, well, they'll never be translated in English. There's no point.
You can show me a book from 2016 from a guy who doesn't know Hebrew, who thinks that the Arabs are Hebrews, and that's your source. If that's your source, the conversation's over. I'm showing you ancient Hebrew manuscripts. I'm showing you in manuscripts of the Tanakh where they're writing the word gav back, both with a vav and a soft bet. And clearly in the time of Ezekiel, they're pronouncing it that way. So there's no question whatsoever. If you'd ask Ezekiel to pronounce the name of God, he would not have said Yehovah. He would have said Yehovah.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemiah Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemiah's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiahswall.com.